You can do years of the work, therapy, coaching, retreats, meditation, shadow work, nervous system work, the books, the practices, all of it, and still find yourself lying awake at 3 a.m., running the same conversation through your head for the 100th time. Still lose yourself completely the moment the certain person walks into the room. Still find that the peace you touched in a retreat or a session or a really good morning is gone by Wednesday. And here's the part that nobody says out loud. For women who are spiritually awake, who have done this much work, the gap does not just feel frustrating. It feels like evidence of something. Like maybe you are the exception. Maybe you're doing something wrong. I want to offer you a completely different possibility. Stay with me. Let me tell you what I mean. You wake up and the thinking has already started before coffee, before you have said a word to anyone. A significant part of your day goes into taking care of others, your clients, your family, your work, while your mind is somewhere else entirely, replaying the past, anticipating the future, rarely here. On an ordinary afternoon, in a difficult conversation, in the moment you react in exactly the way you have spent years trying not to, you find yourself inside the same patterns, lost in your thoughts and your emotions, out of presence. And the self-judgment that follows carries a particular weight because you know better. So you keep it to yourself and wonder if you're the only one. You're not. I promise you that. What if you're not failing? What if the work you have done is real? And what has been distorting is the image of what progress is supposed to look like. The moments you lose presence, the spiral, the reaction, the 3 a.m. are not signs you're going backwards. Returning to presence again and again, imperfectly, is the actual practice, not evidence that it is not working. And wanting things, success, love, ambition, a full life does not mean you are less awakened. Ordinary life is not the obstacle. The difficult conversation, the busy Tuesday, the moment everything feels like too much is where presence also lies. This is for you. If you have been doing inner work and still find yourself reacting, overthinking, and losing presence, if you feel the gap between what you understand and how you actually live, if you lose yourself in relationships or conversations, even when you know better, if you feel confused and guilty about your desires and ambitions, if you've touched something real and lost it by the time life resumed, and if you want to work with someone instead of a new framework to follow. Let me tell you how I got there. In 2017, I was 49 years old and I was running a family business in Greece in the middle of the country's worst financial crisis in decades. Every month, I needed to find 300,000 euros in cash just to place the minimum orders and pay 30 employees. Every week was a prayer that the money would come in before it went out. I was the one everyone looked for solutions, and I had no solutions. I was barely surviving. I came home at 8 p.m. every night. I ate, I drank wine to make the day stop. I gained 45 pounds. My body had been breaking out in severe skin rashes for over a year, head to toe scratching until my skin was red and sore. I was in a relationship with someone who had been my best friend for decades. We were growing more and more apart every week because I had nothing left to give. And then one day I came home and he was gone. And the strangest part, the part that told me everything about where I was, is that my first feeling was relief. And then one morning at the office, I started imagining everything that could go wrong at an upcoming event. My heart started racing, my breath got shallow, the walls felt like they were moving in. I ran downstairs crying, barely breathing into the street. I called my doctor and he told me I was having a panic attack. That was when I finally stopped and looked at myself in the mirror. I could not recognize who I had become, literally and figuratively. And I realized something shocking. I had no idea what made me happy. If you had asked me that question, I had nothing. All my life, I had been doing what I thought would make me look good, intelligent, and lovable. And I had no idea what I actually wanted for me. I was 49 years old and I was starting from zero. I started the work, therapy, coaching, everything I could find. I got certified as a Deep Transformational Coach. I trained with Jack Canfield. I attended an Eckhart Tolle retreat in Norway. And I remember sitting in that room and realizing everyone here is struggling. No one has arrived. Everyone has setbacks and doubts. That realization was genuinely a relief because it meant it was not just me. Things began to change slowly. I started doing the daily practices, meditation, yoga, journaling, walking. I began awakening. And for the first time, I got a glimpse of who I was beneath the mask, beneath the need to look good, capable, and lovable. But here's what I kept noticing in my own experience and then in the women I began working with. The breakthroughs were real. The retreats were profound. The sessions were genuinely transformative. And then ordinary life came back within days and sometimes within hours, back into the same reactions, the same overthinking, the same gap between understanding everything and feeling none of it when it actually mattered. Back to the same frustration. And then I started asking a different question. What if all this is normal? What I discovered was simpler than anything I had tried before. And also harder to live than it sounds. Acceptance, kindness towards myself, being okay with what is, returning to presence again and again without making that returning into another thing to get right. Simple, but not easy to do alone, and not easy to sustain in your daily life. Let me name what is actually happening. Most of the spiritual and personal growth world teaches you how to access presence, retreats, meditation, deep dives, breakthrough experiences. These things are real. I'm not dismissing them, but what they create is a skill at being present in curated conditions. And the more skill you become at accessing presence in those conditions, the sharper the contrast becomes when life pulls you out of it. And because you are self-aware, you do not just struggle, you watch yourself struggling and you judge yourself for it. You are measuring real progress against an impossible image, and every time you fall short of it, you read it as failure. Presence has been treated as a destination, something to access, maintain, and eventually stabilize at, rather than a quality you learn to bring into whatever you already are, into the mess, into the ordinary, into the hardest moments, and the most beautiful ones too. You do not have to do this alone. That's why I created the Art of Living Awakened. Here is what we work through together. how to stop treating awakening as a project to complete and let it become a more natural way of living, even in a life that still has responsibilities, effort, and real difficulty. How to meet setbacks without reading them as evidence you have failed or gone backwards. How to want a full life, success, love, goals, ambition, without the guilt that you're somehow not spiritual enough for wanting it. How to become a more consistent observer of your own reactions, catching yourself sooner, spending less time in the spin. How to gradually build the capacity to stay present under actual pressure, even in the moments that have always seemed to be the hardest. How to slowly bring presence into the ordinary, your relationships, your work, your simplest daily moments without turning it into another thing to perfect. This is about presence as a way of living, something to return to again and again with more ease and less judgment. And I want to be clear, I do not claim to be fully present all the time or enlightened. I walk this alongside you with lived experience and grounded awareness. This is an ongoing work for me too, as much as for everyone or anyone else. I have spoken at the UN. I have been featured on NBC and in Authenticity magazine. I am a certified Deep Transformational Coach and a Jack Canfield Success Principle trainer and a RIM Essentials facilitator. I say all of that briefly because you may have been burned by credibility before. What matters more is whether what I am saying feels true to you and that you can only judge for yourself. Here is what some of the people I have worked with have experienced. One of my clients, a coach herself, came completely unaware of an internal struggle that was driving exhausting patterns in her personal and work life. Through our work together, she saw the pattern clearly for the first time rather than being caught inside it. She described feeling more surrendered and more in flow, lighter. Another came to me stressed and sad. In one session, she went from that to feeling joyful and alive. She said that the feeling stayed with her. A third came with intense anxiety and constant loop of negative thoughts that created fear all day long. Through our work together, she learned to interrupt that spiral, to find her way back into a steadier place when she got lost. And then there is Alex, who has worked with me over a long period. In Alex's own words, who I am being changes every single sitting we have. I am able to love and sustain my relationships because we coach together. I'm being a more conscious person because I met my coach, Myrto. And this is really humbling for me. What changes is not a list of measurable outcomes. What changes is how you inhabit your life. There is less distance between you and your own moments, less management, less of the exhausting inner commentary that follows you everywhere, and more just being there, present in the conversation, in the day, in yourself. I wrote about all this in my book As I Am, my own story of walking this path, and the companion I wish I had when I was in the middle of it. Every client I work with privately receive it as part of what we do together. And I'm not going to ask you what happens if nothing changes in a year from now. I've sat in that chair on the receiving end of that script, and I know exactly how it sounds. And since you have stayed this long, you already know your own answer anyway. I open 5 private coaching spots each month during the first week. That is not a pressure tactic. It is how I keep the work personal and genuinely supported. When those spots are full, they are full. So if something in the video felt true to you, I would love to meet you. The link below will take you to my calendar. Book a call. We will talk. We will see together if this is right for you. I am Myrto. Thank you for watching.